5 Live Formula One.
Hello and welcome to the Netherlands, where we are getting ready for the second practice session of the weekend. The setting this weekend is Zandvoort Circuit, about 30 minutes by train from downtown Amsterdam, and we are just across the sand dunes from the seaside, and it is a beautiful afternoon here. This morning there was torrential rain, but that has cleared away. We've got gorgeous blue skies. The seagulls are soaring above me down here in the pit lane. And as you can hear, the cars are starting up ahead of this second practice session. I'm just standing outside Max Verstappen's Red Bull garage. And if I look to my left, across the start-finish straight, I can see a sea of orange already. The home fans, the home crowd are expecting something great from Max Verstappen. And I think a lot of people are expecting or hope, I suppose, that Max Verstappen and Red Bull can get back to winning ways. It has been quite some time since he stood on the top step of the podium. Perhaps this weekend things will be different for them. But in FP1, it was Lando Norris in the McLaren who led the way with an upgraded McLaren for this weekend, ahead of Max Verstappen with what people are calling a reconfigured Red Bull this weekend. And then it was Lewis Hamilton, who was slightly affected by traffic in his fastest lap in FP1, who finished P3. Of course, the winner last time out in Belgium, almost sort of 26 days ago now, of course, inheriting the win from his teammate George Russell, who was disqualified. I'm Rosanna Tennant down here in the very sunny pit lane, and in the commentary box I'm joined by our lead commentator Harry Benjamin and the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson. And Alice Powell as well is joining us as well, a very busy lady this weekend. She's also in the commentary box, of course, of W Series racing fame. And Harry, did you have time between FP1 and FP2 to get out to the seaside? Are you saving that for later on?
No, I had time. I had a little dip, put the wetsuit on and enjoyed the waves, really. It's like being in Norfolk, by the Norfolk seaside. It's lovely. Home away from home.
It is a beautiful afternoon. It's so different to the weather we came into the track with. It was absolutely thrashing it down this morning, and it made FP1 a little bit tricky and challenging for the drivers, with a wet and slippery track to get going, a bit lacking in grip, and then it dried up, and it's just continued to dry up and get even more glorious. So we didn't learn much in FP1. Are you expecting to learn a lot more in FP2?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think we'll get a better idea of where we are on the long run pace as well. Remember, Sunday is scheduled to be dry. That's race day, obviously, and that is really what they're all gearing up towards. There is still rain in the forecast perhaps for Saturday, so qualifying can still be up in the air, but they're going to be looking at race pace. Of course, a lot of teams, as you alluded to, have some decent upgrades. They're going to be desperate to try and get more laps under their belt for this session, so I think it's going to be busy. Although, to be fair, FP1 was busier than I thought it would be at the start. We had Hulkenberg and Russell heading out quite early doors on the full wet tyre just to get some laps in. So I think we're going to have, though, a very busy hour indeed.
Towards the end of FP1, we had about 10 minutes of dry running, I'd say, with the dry line appearing, and it was 2/10 the gap between Lando Norris, the fastest driver of the session, and Max Verstappen. Is that representative, Andrew? Is this upgrade that we've been talking about for McLaren, is that 2/10? Surely not.
We don't know yet, Rosanna. Given the size of the Miami upgrade, which sort of leapt them from 4/10 behind Red Bull to absolutely on Red Bull's pace, they've said that this isn't as big as the Miami upgrade, but even if it's half that, that's a couple of tenths, so that would put them that far ahead. But let's hold our horses. That was only first practice. It was a very up and down session, as you said, Rosanna. It started wet, ended dry, and it's still really, really windy. And the best quote I heard in the press conference with the team bosses between these two sessions was from James Vowles, the Williams team boss. Said the conditions were more adapted to kite surfing than running a Formula One car.
There you go. That's what Harry can get up to when he does head to the beach later on. I can't wait to hear how he gets on with that particular activity. Alice, this is a tricky track. It's a technical track. We've got camber shifts. We've got undulation as George Russell heads out into the fast lane of the pit lane. Medium tyres on the Mercedes for the British driver. Alice, it's a difficult one to set up. Of course, the first session was a bit higgledy-piggledy in terms of conditions, so they need to get right on it, don't they, in this second practice session?
Yeah, and it's not too often that you see drivers queuing at the end of a pit lane, desperately trying to get some clear space. Perez heads out the garage now to join that queue of cars, and we've probably got about 5 or 6 seconds until we go green, but it's important to get some running in. We've got mixed weather still potentially to come tomorrow, so FP3 could be disrupted with some rain. So this could be the only full dry session that we get before qualifying. So hence why it is going to be a busy session. A lot of drivers will be going out early on. They're going to have to run through all the plans that they had in place if it was going to be dry in free practice 1. They've got to try and do as much of that in this free practice session here.
The cars are heading out. We've got a green light at the end of the pit lane. Lando Norris has just left his garage. Lots of Flovis paint dripping off the back of the McLaren. An upgraded car this weekend. He was fastest in FP1, but it's time for FP2. Harry, the sun is shining. It's all yours, my friend.
Thank you very much, Rosanna. For those who wish to do a sync-up, it's 59 minutes and 15, 14, 13 seconds remain of free practice 2, and straight out of the blocks is the Alpine of Pierre Gasly. Indeed, he was quick out of the blocks in FP1 as well, but actually already it's busier than it was in FP1. Gasly, Sargent, Bottas, Russell, Albon, Perez, all straight out on track, and even dicing out on track as well, making their way through the left-hander of turn 10 towards the chicane of 11 and 12. Already trying to find a little bit of a gap. George Russell overtaking the Sauber and then just not quite getting the Williams in front of him, having to come to a slow through that chicane. But this is what we saw at the end of FP2, Alice, although it's on a smaller scale at the moment. This is going to be tricky in terms of traffic management for Q1 on Saturday.
Yeah, and we saw a few near misses. Gasly and Verstappen were having a bit of a tussle at the final corner. So we will see it, and we've already started to see it in this session as well. As you said, Harry, is that George Russell sweeps into turn 1. He's on the medium tyre. There's only 2 others that are on the hard tyre at the moment that are out there, and that is Pierre Gasly and Alexander Albon. George Russell fires through turn 3. The really banked cambered we hear from Piastri.
I think the box for a new helmet, this visor is completely... Something's completely wrong with this visor. Okay. Basically can't see. Copy.
So that's Piastri on the radio, essentially saying something's wrong with his visor. It's the complete wrong one. He can't see, so he needs to come back into the pits. But what is he referring to there, Alice? Obviously, drivers can change the type of visor they have on their helmet depending on the conditions.
Yeah, so majority of the drivers in the field run Bell helmets. Not all of them do. Max Verstappen doesn't, but Bell do a great job servicing all the helmets. Oscar has a Bell. He will have about 3 helmets to choose from. So usually they have one that's set up with a wet visor. That could be sort of a yellow visor. You see quite a lot of young karters use a yellow visor inside, which brightens up outside, so it's easier to see damp, wet patches. He will definitely have on a tinted visor. It's like wearing sunglasses, basically, as Oscar's now getting a helmet switch, so he is switching from a...
Well, actually, I think Rosanna is just outside McLaren. Rosanna, what can you see?
Yeah, Kim, his trainer's just handed him the other helmet. It's not quite as simple as kind of just on and off. It's got to be unclipped and clipped to the hands device. And so he's just adjusting it now, getting it how he wants, but his trainer was ready with it. It was placed onto the top of the car immediately as he was wheeled back into the garage. And Piastri was busy undoing his helmet as he was being wheeled back. So it needs to be quick so he can get back out on track. But it's mad, isn't it? Just tiny little things. They know if it's not right, it's just not going to be good for the session, and he needs to be totally focused.
They have 10 tear-offs as well, and a tear-off is basically, you could say, like a shield that they'll tear off. You'll see the drivers stick their hands out the side of the cockpit, release it. Just if they get dirt on the tear-offs, that's where you release it. 10 tear-offs is maximum for a driver for a session or a race. Could be that those just maybe aren't in place properly, or it could be something as simple. Maybe it's a brand new visor. It's got a film that's not been released on the inside of the visor. It's not been peeled off. So could be something as simple as that. But there's a quick change and a quick fix for Oscar.
Yeah, that's often it's those little tear-offs that could often cause havoc if they end up being sucked into the side pod of a car behind, or a brake duct even. If they get caught on track, that causes all sorts of things to overheat and can lead to all sorts of trouble. But it doesn't happen too often, but it does happen. Talk of Piastri, actually, as he is still in the pits. He's been racing around with a broken rib the last few races. The race winner with a broken rib, Andrew Benson.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable actually. He was saying he put it on Instagram in the week leading up to this race, but he didn't give any detail, just that he'd broken his rib. Actually, what happened, it turns out the seat had been moulded not quite right at the beginning of the season, and when they got to the sort of the circuits like Spain, Austria, Silverstone, with the sort of high-speed demanding long duration corners, it basically broke his rib. And he said it really started to hurt after Austria, so it was already hurting in Spain, but it sounds like Austria was the sort of thing that tipped it over. And they got the scan done before, just after the day after Silverstone, and that's where they found out it was broken. So he raced through Austria, Silverstone, Hungary and Spa with a broken rib. He said it was already getting better by Hungary and Spa, but anyone who's broken their ribs knows how painful that is. And then you're subjected to, he's strapped in, but even so, subjecting yourself to 5-6 G worth of braking and cornering forces several times a lap. It just goes to show, people, it's a bit ridiculous to say, but I know people who look at Formula One and think, what do you mean they need to be fit? They're not athletes. And I'm like, you really don't know what you're talking about. Oh, we're just watching George Russell go off. That's, and to go through all of that with a broken rib, I can only imagine what sort of pain he was in. Alice, I think you spoke to him, didn't you?
Yeah, I saw him last night at dinner, and he said it was actually touch and go whether I was going to race at Silverstone. He said it was just that painful, he could barely walk, and he slept on it. They had a chat about it, and he said, no, I've got to race, I want to race. And hats off to him, and a lot of people do often say, well, you just sit there and drive, you turn the wheel left, you push some pedals, it's easy. It's really, really not. And we're just getting another quick replay of George Russell looking like he locked up near enough both front wheels.
A little bit strange.
Yeah, if we're looking.
Into turn 9, went through the gravel, released the brake, had a trip through the gravel. It was actually it ended up being both at the end, but it was the front right that locked up there, which maybe a little bit strange, a bit dusty offline there. Certainly gets very dusty offline. Has he got a flat spot there? Hard to see, but I would expect with the size of that lockup he will have one. But George will box, I'm sure, and they'll take a little look.
Disqualified last time out, of course, after that fantastic race win. Was not to be for George Russell in Belgium. He'll be buoyed by the fact, though, that Mercedes have made a huge jump forward to where they are, but Russell with a lockup. Right now, fastest out there is Max Verstappen, as his teammate Sergio Perez runs straight on through Tarzan. That's turn 1. And has to rejoin using the little thin strip of tarmac that's sort of the escape road, which is adjacent to the exit wall, which he does so, rejoins the track. But we saw quite a lot of that in FP1. Obviously mixed conditions in FP1, but seeing it in the dry as well. So Perez, a man under still immense pressure for that seat. He's been given a short reprieve by Red Bull. How long that will last for, we shall see. The next couple of races, crucial for the Mexican driver. His teammate is fastest, a 1:12.1 on the medium tyre. Then it's Norris. Stroll is third. Hamilton. Perez is currently fifth fastest. And this is the sound of Perez.
He did brake very late, in all fairness.
I'm struggling to stop the car into turn 1.
Yeah, copy that.
Well, we've still got that tailwind, blustery wind, almost going across slightly as well into turn 1. But from his onboard there, he did brake pretty late. He did brake very late, and speeds will certainly be higher going down into turn 1 than they were, let's say, last year. And it's a little bit bumpy in the braking zone into turn 1, but he actually locked up quite late on just to try to apply some steering, and it snatched that inside front right, and he sailed off into the gravel.
His teammate also locking up as well, but keeping it out of the gravel was Verstappen. Perez, though, is fifth fastest at the moment, ahead of the two Ferraris. And it's Albon, Hulkenberg, Gasly, which rounds out the top 10. Everybody out there on the medium or the hard tyre. Pirelli bringing the hardest compounds in the range this weekend, just due to the higher speeds on these bank corners we have. Subjects the tyre to so much more force than is usually mounted on them in a race weekend. You've got the huge banking around the final quarter, 18 degrees of banking around the turn 14, 19 degrees through turn 3. That's called Hugenholtz. Not a key overtaking point there as well. So it is a challenging, but I think it's a fun track for the drivers, because there's really not anything else out there that has these kind of huge undulations. It's also quite tight and narrow, especially on the run down out of Hugenholtz through 4, 5, 6. It's almost like you're clinging onto a roller coaster ride, trying to hold on for dear life.
No, it is one of my favourite tracks, and it's your typical old school track. You know, we think of a modern day. Let's think of Paul Ricard, for example. You know, that's just, you make a mistake, you're punished by lap time, but that's about it. And I think drivers love these old school circuits where if you're punished, then you're in the gravel or you're in the wall. You know, people probably think, well, surely you want the easier option because you do less damage and you're going to get away with it. But it's not with that. You know, they're racing drivers for a reason. They like living on the edge. We like that danger aspect. It's a dangerous sport. We hear from Verstappen.
I lost the rear. I'm boxing.
Verstappen then, I lost the rear. I'm boxing. Just making his way through the 11 and 12 chicane as we see where he lost the rear of the car, and I think that was coming through.
That was through turn 7. Yeah, so highest, one of the highest speed corners on the track, just ran slightly wide. So actually, it looks like he got a little bit of understeer initially, which then the front gripped up and he lost the rear slightly. But going back to the point I was making about drivers loving these, you know, we're competitive. That's why we want to race, and that's why we do this sport, and living life on the edge, dicing with the walls, with the gravel, and making sure we get that perfect lap and sync it up together is why these drivers love these type of circuits, and which is why you hear lots of drivers say Monaco. You know, from people watching, they say, oh, well, it's boring, you can't really overtake, but it's such an incredible track to drive, and you get punished if you make a mistake.
Certainly do. 48 minutes and 20 seconds remain. Decent lap being put in at the moment by Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari. Charles Leclerc just starting a quick lap as well. This is the sound of the Monegasque racer down through the brakes, but he's quite late on the brake. He just keeps it on the tarmac coming through Tarzan, but that would have cost him a little bit of time. And I think, has he already backed off? Yes, he has. He makes his way through Hugenholtz, the left-hander, 19 degrees banked corner, so lost quite a lot of time coming through Tarzan there. We're going to get just another look at it for our sake, so we'll try and describe it to you. Lock up.
Just a snatch. So temperatures, we're having a look. So we're over 10 degrees warmer than what we were earlier on today. Track temperature-wise, the sun's out. There's not too many clouds in the sky, but still drivers.
Is it the wind?
It will be the wind. It will be the wind. It will also be the dusty track. We've had a Porsche session out, and that's it. But the thing is, we're right next to the beach, the sand dunes, and even when you're walking around the paddock, I tell you, I wear contact lenses, and my contact lenses are hating the amount of dust that's flying around and going into my eyes. Yeah, I need to be as cool as you, Harry.
No, you need to be as cool as our producer, who's got one of those shades that changes colour when it's light.
Well, I don't earn as much money to buy those kind of sunglasses like our producer, sadly.
Yeah, no. Producer Paddy's the power behind the throne. Fernando Alonso just getting a little bit squirrely on the rear, coming through, where is he coming through turn 7, or the build up towards turn 7 now, coming through 11 and 12. Andrew, technical question for you that I'd like your thoughts on. There was technical regulations were updated slightly in the summer to do with this asymmetric braking. How much more of that can you sort of translate it into human terms for us? Why that change was made, and potentially and what it does?
Well, I think the key point is, I'm not sure how relevant it is, but at least to this year's championship.
Okay.
What it's about is explicitly forbidding having different braking forces applied to one wheel or the other on the same axle. So, in an ideal way, to turn the car, you might want to brake the inside rear wheel, for example, more than the outside rear wheel, so that the car rotates more. And in fact, McLaren famously, back in 1997, had something called a fiddle brake system, which was an extra brake pedal in the cockpit, which the drivers could switch from right to left, and the driver, Häkkinen and Coulthard, could use it for exactly that purpose. It's an idea that comes from trialing. I don't know whether you know what trialing is. It's where mad people drive cars up steep hills in the mud, basically,
That's what you do in the summer holidays.
I did go to a trial a very long time ago.
So we knew he would have done that.
Anyway, it's about outlawing that kind of thing being done electronically and hydraulically with the braking systems of a modern Formula 1 car. Everybody's playing it down, and there's been all sorts of rumours going around in summer break about which team or which other team it might have been applying to. But I wouldn't get too excited about it at this stage.
No, it's sort of the FIA have kind of said it's to tidy up the regulations for 2026. At least that's the reasoning they've given for that small technical upgrade. Update, I should say, to the regulations, which happened during the summer. 44 minutes and 38 seconds remaining. It's Verstappen fastest, 1:12.1. He's 2/10 clear of Lewis Hamilton. That's the sound you can hear right now, and he is on a very quick lap indeed, through the right-hander of 11, through the long left-hander of 12. That brings you out of the chicane. A short burst then down to the first of the double right-handers that finishes off a lap through turns 13. Kumho, then 14, Ari Lyondike, the 18-degree banked corner, which catapults you down the main straight, and Hamilton crosses the line and goes fastest, a 1:11.8 through tyre. Verstappen second, Russell third, Alonso up in fourth, then it's Norris in fifth ahead of Stroll, Albon, Tsunoda, Leclerc, Piastri is 10th ahead of Gasly, Perez is only 12th ahead of Sainz, only 13th, Hulkenberg and Ocon 14th and 15th, and it's Magnussen, Sargent, Ricciardo, and the two Saubers, Joe Guan Yu 19th, and Valtteri Bottas, who we didn't see in FP1, as he stood aside for the Ferrari Driver Academy member Robert Schwartzman, who got a few laps under his belt in the other Sauber, but Bottas now back out on track.
Would you like me to talk about Fernando Alonso for a minute or two?
I'll allow it.
You'll allow it. Okay,
after this.
Radio here.
Oh, George hit a cone.
No, it wasn't someone's thought. I just ran over there.
No, George, it was a cone.
Got away with it. A little bit of a skirmish there in the pit lane, but all fine. And a skirmish out on track, though, and that's for Nico Hulkenberg, who has found the wall and has caused the red flag, and that's turn one in Tarzan. Is he facing the wrong way? He's in the gravel.
I think he is, because that's the escape road.
Yeah. So, Nico Hulkenberg in the Haas, yes, he is facing the wrong way. We haven't seen how it happened. He's in the wall. He's gone past the thin strip of tarmac that is the escape road. Then there's another layer of gravel, and then you get to the wall. He's in the gravel, adjacent to the exit barrier, facing the wrong way.
He's been trying to have a crash all day, Nico Hulkenberg.
Well,
hasn't he?
exactly.
And he's finally succeeded.
He was really struggling to keep that Haas on track in FP1, but you'd almost forgive him due to the conditions. But it is bone dry out on track now, and that is Hulkenberg's session over. Red flag, the clock continues to count down. Everybody else makes their way back to the pits, but Hulkenberg then sliding off. Well, as soon as we've seen how it happened, we'll describe it to you, but he's taking some of the advertising hoarding with him as well. He's getting out, he's safe, out of the car, Nico Hulkenberg. It was his birthday this week as well, turned 37 years old. In fact, his hometown is only 150 kilometres away from the circuit here, so a bit of a home race for him. Not what he would have wanted in FP2. This is it, Alice.
Ooh. So, I didn't see if he had a wheel on the grass when he braked and turned in there, but it looks like the rear's just totally locked up on him, and he was a passenger then. It's not very deep gravel here, so it doesn't really do much to slow you down, and then it's a side impact into the wall for Nico. It's not a heavy impact into the wall, so he's probably escaped anything internally on the rear there.
Is that, I mean, putting sort of some sort of brake failure aside, is it almost, could it be too much brake bias towards the rear?
Could be too much brake bias to the rear, so there's more bite, so we're going to see another angle of it again, and I'm just going to see if he gets anywhere near the grass on that. No, he was fine.
Don't know what happened there.
Yeah, I don't know either, Nico. Yeah, we're having a look.
Just the rear completely locked up.
Yeah.
I'm braking.
So yeah, even the team sound a bit puzzled as we are really to what happened there. So it could be something car-wise. Maybe it is the brake bias, but I doubt it. It could be something else that's snatched, or maybe just cold rear brakes.
Well, Nico Hülkenberg is out of the Haas and walking across the track now back towards the pit lane, the German driver, and in his FP2 session for Haas. Finishing earlier than he would have liked, just over 40 minutes left, everybody in the pit lane as the marshals get to work clearing that. Hopefully we get a green flag out on track shortly. But this does give us the perfect time to talk about Fernando Alonso. Now, Andrew Benson, Fernando Alonso's last few race results. Well, out of the last 3 races, he's scored points twice, and they've been 8th places. What's going on with Aston Martin and Fernando Alonso at the moment? I feel like they're in that middle part of the championship order, kind of a little bit of no man's land.
Yeah, so I spoke to him yesterday. I hadn't actually been to see him for a while. But anyway, what's going on is that the car's not quick enough, and they don't really know why. And the reason what was interesting yesterday was he made some jokes in his press conference. He's always good value, as you probably know, Harry. And there was just a bit of speculation over the last week because Kyle Larson, the NASCAR driver, said that he was better than Max Verstappen in everything apart from Formula One. Now, how Kyle Larson knows that, I don't know. But Alonso said, well, Max is quite good in GTs as well, and I bet he's good in everything, but still not as good as me. so I wanted to ask him how he felt about his season so far, because I don't think it's been his best season, to say the least. And I said, look, Fernando, even though you're better than Max, and he stopped me immediately, because I was joking, obviously. He goes, no, in some disciplines, I mean. In Formula 1, I accept he's the same. Anyway, so the issue, this is not Alonso talking, this is someone in the team I was talking to earlier. The issue with him and this car is that he needs strong feel from the front. He's talked about that a lot. He needs to feel the front axle. And he's finding this year's Aston Martin very unpredictable. In mid-corner, it just suddenly there's no grip. So there's obviously an aerodynamic flaw somewhere, which affects the airflow and the over the front wing and the downforce that's produced at the front of the car, and that's really affecting him. And he admitted that he said he wasn't super happy with the season that he'd been doing, but he did point out that he's still got twice as many points as his teammate, and if you look at the average between them, it's still nearly 0.3 of a second in qualifying. So, I mean, it is only Lance Stroll, but in the team, they said, and they would, of course, say this, but Alonso himself said it too, that Stroll's actually driving really well this year. There was a specific problem with the car last year that Stroll couldn't get on with, but they fixed that for this year, so he's been a bit quicker. But anyway, that's. But I'm not making any judgments about anything, other than to say it was just interesting to hear him talk about that and doing the usual sort of slightly. I'm not doing bad. If you look down, if you really look into the detail, I'm not really doing as bad as everyone seems to think I am.
Every weekend, I always write down the stat that you always +1 for Fernando Alonso with every race that goes by. We're now at 190 Grand Prix since his last win, 205 Grand Prix since his last pole position. I'm waiting for the day that I could scratch that back down to 0. Could it come?
I'm sure he is too. I don't think he's very happy this year, to say the least. Actually the season, last year was obviously fantastic for Aston Martin, although it tailed off towards the end. They started to lose their way a bit with their development, and I think we've seen that into this year. The car started this year strongly, at least in terms of qualifying, but it was falling backwards in races, but as the year's gone on, it's just fallen backwards full stop. And we're yet to see any evidence that Aston Martin really know how to fix that. And the issue is it basically doesn't have enough downforce overall, as well as this issue with the inconsistency of the front end. And I think that's why we've seen Alonso have a few more mistakes than we would normally do. Like, remember the crash in practice at Imola? That was indicative. It was the second Ravazza. That was indicative of the front end not biting and just losing it. He was expecting it to be able to go around the corner faster than it would. So he's lost confidence in the car. And I think that's why we're seeing him not performing at the same sort of the usual Alonso type of level.
We're back underway, by the way. 36 minutes dead on the clock remaining. Verstappen out on track, absolutely bringing that Red Bull. Just one last thing on the Alonso-Aston Martin storyline. I imagine he is pushing hard for them to secure Adrian Newey's services. That would be a foregone conclusion. And how quickly, or do you think their form would quickly turn around the minute Adrian Newey joins?
Well, it's the sort Adrian Newey can do remarkable things. I remember back in when he left Williams in 1996, end of 96, and joined McLaren, and he had a period of gardening leave. I think about to see a pretty quick lap time from Max Verstappen here on the soft tyre. There he is, goes faster than his own time by 8/10, which I guess you'd expect on the soft. So he's quicker again, but Lando Norris is about to come round, Harry. Yeah, we'll finish this point about Adrian Newey in a minute, but let's do these lap times first, shall we? Yeah,
Verstappen just went across the line with a 1:10, and Norris is also a 1:10, but he is, less than half a tenth quicker than Verstappen. Absolutely nothing between Norris and Verstappen, both on the soft tyre, but at the moment it's in the favour of Lando Norris. So a couple of drivers sticking on the soft tyre then and going quickly. Bottas has snuck up into fourth, but he's over a second back on the soft tyre in his Sauber. Albon's also on the soft, and we'll see what Piastri has got actually too when he comes through. At the moment he's just coming through sector 1. Perez pops up into third, 6/10 back from Norris and his teammate Verstappen, so Perez with work to do. Sargent pops up into fourth. Let's just see where Albon comes across the line. And the other Williams, heavily upgraded Williams cars this weekend. They went well here last year, and at the moment sitting pretty early stages. Albon fourth, Sargent fifth.
Yeah, they didn't set. Actually, Albon did a great job on the hard tyres. He's jumped straight from the hard to the soft, whereas everyone else in front of him, and you could say around him as well, have gone from the medium to the soft. Oscar Piastri has got Flovis on the right-hand side of his front suspension, front wishbones. He is now slightly quicker in the middle sector than Lando Norris. Runs wide, Sparks kicking up on the exit of turn 12 into 13, and then the final corner, turn 14, heavily cambered, DRS wide open, and if he nailed this final sector, he should definitely go to the top of the times. 2/10 clear of his teammate Lando Norris. So Oscar, again, up there where McLaren want him to be, alongside Lando Norris. And you could say the same for Perez, apart from he is still shy of at least half a second behind his teammate.
Yeah, I think there's going to be quite a few cars inserting themselves in that 6/10 gap between Verstappen and Perez, and 6/10 is not the sort of margin Red Bull want to be seeing between Verstappen and Perez, and that will not be, as we've been saying all day, Perez is not out of the woods in terms of his drive security. That's not helping him at the moment. There's two Mercedes drivers just winding up on their warm-up laps, about to start their flying laps on the soft tyre as well, Alice, haven't we? So we're about to see how quick Russell and Hamilton can go. And Fernando Alonso's also just starting his, just come to the end of the first sector on his lap.
Yeah, so we've got lots of drivers out on track on the soft tyre at the moment. The only two that aren't out on track, well, if you're not including Nico Hülkenberg, who's found the wall at turn 1. Max Verstappen's in the pits. He's already set a lap. Carlos Sainz as well. He hasn't come out on soft tyre yet. But Fernando Alonso is heading through the final part of sector 2, through the tricky, long turn 10. Really hard. It's one of those corners where you turn in and you still don't know where the exit is. It's a blind corner. Turns. It feels like it goes on forever when you're filing through there. Exit of the chicane, where Oscar Piastri was kicking up Sparks on the exit curb there, and we're seeing out the back now from the Aston Martin. Sparks continue to fly. He's in 14th at the moment, and he's going to jump up into P4, 6/10 of a second though, behind Oscar Piastri, and now he's demoted into P5 because Yuki Tsunoda slots in front of him.
But as I was talking about drivers inserting themselves between Verstappen and Perez, I wasn't expecting those drivers to be Tsunoda, Alonso and Kevin Magnussen, but there they are.
Very true. Hamilton now fastest in the first sector of anybody. George Russell, this is going to be a pretty decent lap as well. Where's he going to pop up to?
Wow.
Just over half a tenth quicker than Oscar Piastri. And look at Lewis Hamilton. He's not going to be too far away from his teammate either.
No, fastest in the middle sector was George Russell. His teammate Hamilton is fastest in the first sector, round the final 2 corners. 18 degrees of banking that catapults you out onto the start-finish straight. Lewis Hamilton, what is he going to do when he comes across the line? It's not as quick as his teammate, but it's third fastest. It's 30 minutes and 42, 41, 40 seconds remain of FP2. Russell fastest with a 1:10.7. Then it's Piastri. Hamilton a 10th back in third. Norris, Verstappen is 5th. Then comes Tsunoda in 6th ahead of Alonso. Magnussen, Perez is 9th ahead of Daniel Ricciardo. Albon is 11th. Gasly 12th. Sargent 13th ahead of Stroll and the two Saubers. Joe ahead of Bottas. Ocon is 17th ahead of Leclerc. Hulkenberg is out of this session after crashing into the wall. He is fine and out of the car. Carlos Sainz's session is over. An update coming through from the team. He is done and dusted as a gearbox issue has been detected. Hard luck for Carlos Sainz there, and well, they'll be hoping that they won't have to incur any penalties for any gearbox change that's required. They won't have to for Carlos Sainz.
You don't get that anymore unless you exceed your allocation.
I couldn't remember where he was on the allocation, but I think he's still fine. Down, but he's currently down 19th, and session done and dusted though for the Spanish driver, who at least has his future secured now. It may be a bit of a downward step, but it's done and dusted, and he's off to Williams to replace Logan Sargent next season. And Sainz and Albon will be the Williams lineup there. And we're just seeing images of Carlos Sainz's car in the garage. The front end completely off the car, up on the jacks, and here he is on the radio.
Gearbox. Do something with your gearbox. Copy. Steady 7 here.
Looks like there's some kind of leak as well. Mechanics wiping the floor, the rear of underneath the rear of Carlos Sainz's car, and have a drip tray underneath it as well. So disappointing end. Charles Leclerc, his teammate, is now out on the soft compound of tyre, going from the medium tyre. He's all the way down in 18th place, but everybody in front of him have run the soft tyre. As they wait for him to cross the line, we expect him to jump further up the field. He does, but only into 9th place, 7.5 tenths off George Russell, who is at the top of the time. So I'd say that's pretty disappointing for Ferrari, because they didn't look too bad this morning.
No, but Ferrari still have got these bouncing issues that they've been trying to reduce, really, ever since, well, Imola. They sort of brought an upgrade and it didn't quite work for them. It almost exacerbated the problems, and now they've almost had to go back on themselves to try and find a way forward, having looked like one of the teams to beat at the start of the season. Indeed, in the first 7 races this season, they scored the second most points of anybody. Red Bull only beating them. In the last 7 races, well, they're actually the 4th slowest team when it comes to points scored in the last 7 races. They're behind Red Bull, Mercedes and McLaren, who currently have accrued the most amount of points of anybody in the last 7 races. So I think that underlines how brilliant this season is that we're enjoying. You know, who would have thought this? We were both in Bahrain together, commentating the race, and let's be honest, Bahrain was a bit of a slog to get through. That was a rough race.
Yeah, we came away from that, didn't we, thinking, well, this is going to be a long season, isn't it? But how quickly things can change. And it has done, and it's turning into be, I would say, a very, very exciting season.
Best season since...
Can I just hold your horses here? It's really competitive at the front, but there's not a championship fight, really.
No,
so you
but
can't
I think you can still enjoy it.
I am enjoying it, but I don't think, for me, the best season since, you can't compare it to 21, for example, or 2012, for example, or...
But there hasn't been a championship fight since 21.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so come on, we've got to take what we can get.
I'm not. It's great at the front at the moment, but it's just a shame the season didn't start in Miami. Is really what I'm saying.
Yes. Yeah. Or the likes of, I suppose, if McLaren had, well, it's saying the same thing you just said, Andrew. If McLaren had been straight out of the box in Bahrain with the car they had in Miami, then Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, Max Verstappen would all be in the Drivers' Championship fight as well. Mercedes might have joined the party a little later on, but I think it bodes well for next year. But then we get that big regulation change in 2026.
Such a shame, isn't it?
Yeah, it just seems.
Can't they delay that? Come on.
But this happens every time. Every time it's a regulation change, and obviously you get natural convergence, and that's when you get the most competitive racing. And then the FIA go, okay, right, blank checkbook, well, not checkbook, but blank sheet of paper, let's go again. And one team maybe the dominant team gets replaced, but they're just replaced by another team who then goes dominant. So it just seems like sort of shooting ourselves in the foot a little bit every time we do that. But
what should we do about it, Harry? What are you going to do about it?
I'm going to write a letter to the FIA and try and convince them. But we'll enjoy it for what we got. Of course, 10 races
Let's live in the
left.
present, shall we?
It's 10
fantastic,
races to the
and
end
we
of
love
the
it.
season. And, well, we've definitely got to fight on for the Constructors' title. That is for sure. Now, we've seen some of the qualifying runs so far in this session. We're now getting into more of the long run pace. Cars out on track on a mixture of the soft and the medium. Verstappen's out there on the medium at the moment, going through some long run pace. In terms of the standings, let's just bring you up to speed with them. In the Constructors, that is what we're all kind of hinging our hopes on at the moment. Red Bull lead the way, 408 points to their name. They are 42 ahead of McLaren, who are only 21 ahead of Ferrari. Then it's Mercedes in 4th, Aston Martin a little bit more detached in 5th. Then there's a nice battle in the lower half of the field for 6th between RB, Haas, and even Alpine aren't too far off of that in 8th. Then it's Williams in 9th, and Sauber still 10th and last, the only team not to score a point.
I think one important point to make about this season, I think, is just what a big story it really is. Here's some radio from George Russell.
Check the floor after exit curb, turn 13.
A firm.
George Russell's
Second
on the
to last
radio.
corner. He did lots of sparks throughout the back of that Mercedes.
Yeah, it's so. I mean, I think as you said about the Constructors' Championship, Harry, it's Verstappen's. It's going to be tough to beat Hamilton. Verstappen, he's 78 points ahead of Lando Norris, who's second, which is an average. Basically, Norris needs to outscore by Verstappen by an average of about 8 points a race. So that's more than the gap between first and second. Every race to catch him before the end of the season. So that's how tough that is, especially when Verstappen's performing as consistently as he is. But in the Constructors, it's only 42 points between McLaren and Red Bull, and there's only one Red Bull scoring big points. And McLaren last won the Constructors' Championship in 1998. And think about the journey they've been on since then. You know, they stayed competitive for a long time. They had a real dark period through the mid-2010s where they really lost sight of themselves pretty much. To get back to where they are in such short order effectively over the last couple of years is really impressive. And I think if they do pull it off and win a Constructors' Championship, normally the Constructors' Championship is not that big a deal. For me, this year, that would become quite a big story.
Well, there's a fantastic interview you can listen to that Andrew did just a short while ago on the latest Checker Flag podcast with the CEO of McLaren, Zach Brown, and just when he came into that team in that sort of dire period they were going through, both financially and in terms of on-track performance, and how he's turned the team around and almost ahead of schedule. So do give that a listen if you get a little bit of time. You can just search Checker Flag on BBC Sounds and indeed wherever you get your podcasts. But right now, this is free practice 2 for the Dutch Grand Prix. It's 22 minutes and 18 seconds remain of the session. Lando Norris is out on track at the moment on the medium tyre, gathering some long run data. Russell and Piastri have just gone out there as well. Russell and Piastri are currently fastest of anybody on their soft tyre runs earlier on in this session. Hamilton third, then it's Norris and Verstappen rounds out the top 5. Decent showings early on from Alonso, Tsunoda and indeed Kevin Magnussen. Of course, we don't know fuel loads, but they are 6th, 7th and 8th ahead of Leclerc, and Albon squeezing his Williams into the top 10. Perez is 12th ahead of Ricciardo, then it's Gasly, Sargent 15th, Joe 16th ahead of Ocon, Bottas 18th. Sainz out of this session with gearbox issues. Hulkenberg out of this session after losing the car with the brakes coming through Tarzan turn 1 and finding his Haas into the wall.
So I don't want to get carried away yet, because we'll do long run corner in about 10 minutes or so when some proper running has gone on. I'm sorry, I've forgotten how to speak. But Lando Norris's first lap on his race run that he just started was 7/10 quicker than Max Verstappen's.
Championship
Juicy.
on. Drivers' Championship is on. You can't tell me that and not expect the Drivers' Championship.
Shall I just step out and let you guys fight over this?
Well, we'll get it. Let's see how the next few laps unfold, and then we'll come back later for Andrew Benson's long run corner.
But I'm going to step in here. couple of retirements potentially, a couple of crashes, and then you never know. We've still got quite a few number of races left to go. I'm sure Harry can give me the exact
But this is
number.
the thing, Alice.
And-
Max doesn't make mistakes.
No,
And
but other
Red
people
Bull don't
around
have
him
retirements.
could.
Yeah, they could crash into him. Yeah, who are you going to pay?
Well, I'm going to borrow Harry's checkbook.
Yeah, it's blank. 20 minutes and 28 seconds remain. And in terms of upgrades, McLaren have bought a heavy upgrade this weekend. Not quite as much as when they basically transformed the whole car back in. But they bought a fair whack this weekend, along with the likes of Williams. They brought a really big upgrade. James Bow saying sort of the first part of a cycle of upgrades for a team that really had nothing, not even had the same parts on the same car. Any of the new bits have really gone on Alex Albon's car, and Logan Sargent has had to deal with the old car. So they bought a new floor body, diffuser, side pod, engine cover, a new central air intake system that sits within the roll hoop as well. So Williams, who went very well here last year, Albon qualified 4th. Sargent was the first time he got into the top 10. Albon finished in the points in 8th. Unfortunately, Sargent went on to retire from that race, but it was a good run for Williams. So I wonder if perhaps they might be a little bit of a dark horse this weekend, as they now have their driver lineup sorted for next year with Carlos Sainz coming into that team. We will bid farewell to Logan Sargent at the end of the season. There, of course, are still seats up for grabs, but the rumblings in the paddock are that Sargent will not be in Formula One next year, perhaps venturing across the pond to IndyCar. But it's a shame for Logan Sargent, obviously, to lose your seat, but you've got to perform at the top of your game. But equally, it's hard to get a true indication, don't you think, Alice, and where his mental state will be as well. Because A, benched in Australia for Albon to have his car because Albon crashed in practice, and then to have your team boss openly in the media publicly courting another driver while you're also struggling to get the results in only your second year of Formula One. That's a tough pill to swallow.
Yes, plain and simple is the answer there. It is, but this is Formula One. We talked about it earlier on during our coverage of Free Practice 1 that essentially it's a pressure cooker that you are under. These drivers are under so much pressure. You just look at the talent in Formula 2 alone. All these drivers, they want a team to take a punt on them. They want a team to have them. And yes, whether a driver is bringing money, with the results that Sargent has had, they've not been good enough with the damage that he has caused. Okay, Albon has caused a lot of damage as well, but he's been getting results, whereas Sargent hasn't. And, I think Sargent left F2 too early. I think he still needed a little bit more experience and time to learn in F2.
Well, I remember that even in his last race in F2, he still had to finish, I think it was something like in the top 6 to make sure he got the super license points in order to even get to Formula 1 in the first place. So that's how sort of ragged it was right up to the bitter end.
Yeah, it certainly was. So in that sense, for Sargent, it's been difficult, but at the same time, as I've said, there are people, young drivers that want the seat, and Sargent hasn't done enough. So he's going to venture off back to America with the rumours to do IndyCar, which he can continue to have a career in.
Do you think we're getting into a bit of another golden age of drivers approaching? We've got obviously the those who are staying on the grid and the stalwarts and the legends. You've got Hamilton and Alonso still here, and then you've got the more young but the still experienced. So the likes of Russell, Norris, Leclerc. I've put Albon in that list as well, and now and Carlos Sainz as well. And then now, Verstappen, obviously, and now we're on the cusp of getting a new wave of young/rookie drivers. I'll put Piastri first up in that list, and then we've got Oliver Behrman joining next year. We could well have Kimi Antonelli in the Mercedes. Liam Lawson might well get another run in. This could be a really exciting time. Jack Doohan, obviously, in the second Alpine has been confirmed. This could be one of the most sort of exciting grids we've had in quite a while.
I think from a driver sense, I would say that the future looks pretty bright for Formula 1. Let's take out then Hamilton, let's take out Alonso, the two eldest drivers on the grid, Hulkenberg as well, we were going to be losing Magnussen. But then you look at the Russell, Piastri, Norris, Verstappen, those that are currently running in the top 5, they're fairly close with age. Okay, Piastri is the youngest out of those. And they're still close together. They're young, they're competitive, they're hungry. They want to win. I'm not saying Hamilton and Alonso are not hungry. They certainly still are. But those drivers I've just listed, they're going to be here for, Verstappen has said that he hasn't got another 200 races.
200, yeah.
We'll see. Maybe it's just him saying that. Who knows? But even if we took him out of the equation, we've still got a good talent and level of drivers. We're just seeing a replay of an unsafe release by, is that Logan Sargent, the Williams, that pulled out in front of Lance Stroll?
It's certainly a Williams. No, it's Albon.
Was it Albon?
Albon being released into the path of Lance Stroll's Aston Martin. Lance Stroll having to very much bail out of it, ease off the throttle, hit the brakes. The stewards will have a look at that one, and I suspect a fine might well be coming the way of the Williams team there.
I would say so. Certainly unsafe release there. Behrman, as you touched on, we've got Antonelli potentially.
But it's a bit like the sort of 2017, 18, 19, where we had Russell, Leclerc, Albon all coming onto the scene. At that time, graduating from Formula 2. It feels like we're getting something similar. That was
exciting.
Exactly.
And these drivers are still there. They still want to prove themselves. They still want to win races, want to win championships, and they certainly have the talent to do that. So in terms of driver-wise, it's exciting. We've got a nice little lineup of drivers, even for the remainder of the season. We've got Russell, Piastri, Hamilton, Norris, Verstappen is your top 5. That's exciting.
There are still a couple of seats to be confirmed. That second seat at Sauber, which will become Audi in 2026. So who goes alongside Nico Hulkenberg, and of course, who will go alongside George Russell, although it's heavily expected to be Antonelli. He may well even get an FP1 outing next week in Monza. He is, of course, an Italian driver. He turns 18 on Sunday, actually. So getting the job done there on his Mercedes run plan in the build-up to perhaps a race seat. And, of course, putting the Red Bull saga to one side. Well, here's Russell on the radio first.
Has the wind picked up?
No, we don't see anything on the wind.
No, it's changed. It's not even really changed direction. I'm going by the flags.
Steady, isn't it?
Yeah, it's still a bit of a headwind. A tailwind going into turn 1. It's gusty though, so it's blustery. So maybe that's what that George is feeling there. But doesn't seem like it's. It actually looks like it's eased from the flags outside our commentary box window.
Yeah, we've got quite a nice vantage point actually from our commentary box. We're sort of right at the start of the pit lane entry, opposite the grandstands, so we can see the cars zooming by. Alice Powell, you're a team principal. Who are you putting in that second seat alongside Nico Hulkenberg? Because that's really, Carlos Sainz has turned it down, and they were openly courting Sainz. Do they keep Bottas? Do they keep Joe within that fold? Do they look outside? Maybe a Kevin Magnussen? What are you doing? Or do you punt on a complete rookie? Or do you nick a Liam Lawson from Red Bull?
I think Liam Lawson is a good shout.
Oh, another incident between, in the pit lane, Ricciardo and Joe Guanyu, the Sauber driver, being released into the path of Ricciardo. That is being investigated after the session. Again, I expect something similar, a fine, because it's in practice, so it'll be a fine that goes to the team.
I've said numerous times, I'm always one for putting young drivers up from, let's say, Formula 2 into Formula 1. Maybe you will see that with Antonelli somewhere along the line at some point. I don't think... I like taking a punt on the younger drivers, and Liam Lawson is in that category. I think he did a great job stepping in, well, this time last year, for Daniel Ricciardo. He did really well. It was tricky conditions here last year. He kept it on the road. He had a good result, a decent result, and he racked up some good results in the 4 races that he did, or 5 races that he did. So, potentially, I think that's a good shout. Obviously, it all depends with Red Bull, because he is heavily connected connected there as well. I would have been all in favour of putting him in the Red Bull seat next to Max Verstappen. Maybe that will still happen. And Andrew Benson says it's not necessarily set in stone that Perez is going to be there, so maybe Red Bull won't want to release him just in case. But I'm always up for putting young drivers in. I think Hulkenberg is an experienced driver, so he's your experienced one there that a young driver can learn from. Hulkenberg, if you don't necessarily want the feedback or trust the feedback of the young driver as much, you've got Hulkenberg there, so I'm certainly one for putting a young driver in.
I would agree with you, and Red Bull have to do something with Liam Lawson, I think contractually as well, because I think there's something in this contract where they've got to decide by September. Otherwise, he might well become a free agent and could be nicked basically by another team, which is when an Audi and a Sauber might come into play. But do you think, just to play devil's advocate to you, there's a lot of, obviously, a bit of turmoil going on within Sauber Audi at the moment. They just got rid of Andreas Seidel and Oliver Hoffmann, who were setting up that team. And they brought in Mattia Binotto, formerly team principal of Ferrari. He's now going to be Chief Operations Officer and Chief Technical Officer. And they then poached Jonathan Wheatley, the sporting director of Red Bull, to become their team principal. You've got Nico Hulkenberg, who you know is a steady driver, very quick over one lap, and can score points. But then, just while you get yourself set up from a Sauber transition to an Audi, would you not want to have two of those drivers? My case for Valtteri Bottas to remain in that team. A Bottas-Hulkenberg lineup. You've got two quick quali drivers. You've got a man who's taken it and beaten Lewis Hamilton on his good days, and a man you know who can score points when he's got a car capable of doing so. I put it to you, Alice Powell.
You could, but then you could look at it as well that you want an experienced driver for when the new regs, two experienced drivers for when the regs come in. So you could sign them maybe just for a 1-year deal and see how they get on in the first year and go, actually, their feedback is great, they're very experienced, they're decent, we'll keep them for the next year.
So yeah, it could well be a Bottas-Hulkenberg lineup. I'm hearing more and more Bottas might well just cling on. So we'll see how that one fades out. But 8 minutes and 35, 34, 33 seconds remain of free practice 2. And currently George Russell is the fastest driver on track.
Now we've seen quite a few laps. We've got 8 minutes left. I think we need a bit of a pick-me-up. Yeah, we're getting towards the end of the session.
I'm ready.
Are you ready?
Ready.
It's time for this.
Long Run Corner with Andrew Benson.
So Lando Norris has been absolutely smashing it out there on the medium tyre. So medium tyre runners, we've got Norris, Verstappen, Perez, Hamilton and Leclerc. Norris averaging 1 minute 15.5 seconds per lap. Hamilton 1 minute 16.0, so half a second. And Verstappen 1 minute 16.1, so a tenth slower than Hamilton and 6/10 slower than Norris for Verstappen, and Charles Leclerc lapping around about the same pace as Hamilton. So unless there's something anomalous there, it looks like McLaren's upgrade might actually be really something special, and I would say on the basis of that, they're the favourites for the weekend going forward, although of course it is potentially going to rain tomorrow, Alice. On the soft tyre, we've only really had George Russell, but he's showing good pace as well. Yeah, it's all set up really interestingly, and Sergio Perez, I'm afraid, is not close either. He's 3/10 slower than his teammate Max Verstappen, which is probably not a surprise, but it's, again, not what Red Bull wanted to be seeing.
Is the quick lap time in the McLaren being backed up by Piastri as well?
So Piastri's on the soft tyre. Okay. Good question. But he's...
Well done, Harry. Very good question.
Very good question. I missed him on my...
Oh, no.
I haven't missed him. I missed reading him out.
Oh, okay.
That's what
sorry.
I mean. He's actually about half... He's quite a bit slower than Russell, half a second slower than Russell on the soft tyre.
Okay.
This is not pure science, and I don't always get this right. Sometimes when the actual data comes through, which is correct, teams have a way of correcting the data for fuel loads that they perceive to be in the cars, because they've got all sorts of data that they can analyse from these sessions, rates of acceleration from the GPS, that sort of thing, which they can guesstimate what the fuel load is, which I can't do from here. I'm just running on pure lap time. Sometimes the order changes a bit when you see those. I get a list of times about half an hour after the session. Sometimes it's a different order. but so this is just an indication at the moment. But it does suggest, I mean, it's not a surprise, is it, that McLaren are looking quick, but it is a surprise that they're looking that quick, I think.
It really is. Well, it's not an exact science, but it is Andrew Benson's long run corner, so thank you very much for that.
Do you feel better now you've had that?
Oh, you know what? It's just like now, it's almost like now the day can begin, don't you think?
Yeah, we need the start of our days.
It really is, with just over 5.5 minutes remaining. So it's looking good for Lando Norris and McLaren in these early stages. But of course, we'll have another practice session tomorrow, so we get a little bit of wheel-to-wheel action going through Tarzan, the RB of, let's see, what was it? It was Ricciardo and Albon going side by side. The Williams diving down the inside. James Vowles has actually been saying that he's very happy with the upgrades that are going on to the Williams. They are working well at the moment, so hopefully they will be fine-tuned and tweaked as we go throughout the weekend. Upgrades to Albon and Sargent, and then another bit of wheel-to-wheel action courtesy of the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc, diving down the inside of Sergio Perez, late on the brakes, locks up the front right, but he makes it through. It is just free practice too, though, but Leclerc desperate to get past Perez there.
Yeah, and actually going into the braking zone, mainly offline really, is pretty bumpy into turn one, so you often see people dive down the inside, have those little lock-ups, still quite dusty. There's a crown in the road as well, all the way pretty much down the main straight, which makes it a little bit tricky if you're trying to cross over at the start as well with wheel spin, particularly mainly in the wet. So that's something to keep an eye on throughout the weekend, certainly going into the race on Sunday. Charles Leclerc, I'd say Ferrari will be pretty disappointed with their pace. They've got Magnussen just in front of Charles Leclerc, and of course Sainz is down in 19th, but not completing many laps. Well, only 7 laps due to a gearbox issue, so a really disappointing day for Ferrari so far.
Yeah, it certainly is. They'll be hoping to find a little bit more coming into tomorrow. Now, Alice, we can't have you in here without talking a little bit about Alpine. Of course, you have a very close association with them. You're overseeing the junior series, very much working across F1 Academy with them this weekend, and Abby Pulling going well so far. But I suppose stepping back a little bit, big picture, over the summer, new team principal, Oliver Oakes, you know him as well from junior series team principal at Hi-Tech. How much is that sort of fresh injection of young blood at quite a top level doing for the team in these early stages?
Positive, really positive so far. Like you said, I've known Oliver a long time now. He was a very successful racer himself. He's been running Hi-Tech, which is a very successful team in Formula 2, Formula 3, Formula 4. They very well-established team. So he knows his stuff. So everyone is super excited for Oliver to be joining the team. He's here obviously this weekend. Wasn't on track yesterday. He's arrived today, and it's all so positive. And it's it's what the team needs. They don't want to be running where they're running currently. We're sitting where we are at the moment, 14th with Gasly, 17th with Ocon. That's not where they want to be. Certainly after results from last year. Gasly got a podium here last year as well. So there's a lot of work to do. People acknowledge there's a lot of work to do. People are also saying, Andrew touched on it in free practice 1, well, it's going to be, the team's going to be sold for Hi-Tech. We've been told by Luca as Magnussen skates across the gravel at turn 12, escapes any damage as he continues his run on the soft tyre. We've been told that the team is not for sale, so that's the word we've got to go with.
Well, absolutely, and it seems like a lot of work is going on at Alpine to recover from the start of the season. Obviously, Oliver Oakes being signed, Jack Doohan being announced to take the vacant spots that Esteban Ocon has left. Ocon bound for Haas next season, so it will be Doohan and Gasly next year for Alpine. 3 new hires in the aero engineering department as well for Alpine over the last few races, and a big upgrade coming, which they said will form the basis of their 2025 car, coming a few races after the break. So perhaps we'll see that in 2 more races' time. And see where they are. But off the back of Spa, they know they've been overweight at the start of this season, so just chopping off a bit of weight suddenly allows you a huge amount of lap time. So seeing the same thing with the likes of Williams as well, who are also overweight at times this season. So it certainly is seeming like they're trying to build this upward trajectory, and that's all we want, isn't it? We want to see tight competitive racing up and down the field. And they are embroiled in a little bit of a fight, although they are behind in it at the moment. Alpine 8th in the Constructors' Championship. They are 18 points adrift of Haas, who are ahead of them, and Haas are only 7 points behind RB in that battle for 6th over in the Constructors' Championship. This is now Sergio Perez making his way into the right-hander, then the left-hander of 11 and 12. The gravel trap awaits you in your left. This is where we'll expect a lot of traffic management being done in the first part of qualifying tomorrow. Makes his way round the first of the double right-handers that finish off this lap. First it's turn 13, Kumho, then you get to that 18 degrees of banking round Arie Luyendyk. Extremely cambered corner that puts you on to the start, finish straight all the way towards Tarzan turn 1, and then you loop back on yourself through the quick kink of turn 2, the right-hander, and then that fantastic 19-degree banking through turn 3, Hugenholtz, before you're then spat out on the run down 4, 5, 6 and 7, almost like a roller coaster ride, hanging on for dear life before you get into the final, into the middle sector of the lap. And I think that is the checkered flag. Out. An hour goes by very quickly, doesn't it? It's George Russell who ends the session fastest. We kicked off the session with some quali simulations and then ended up doing more of the long run pace, and Lando Norris certainly looking quicker. We're just seeing a bit of a replay of the McLaren diving down the inside of the Alpine into turn 11. Oscar Piastri getting his elbows out nicely. Nice overtaking move on Gasly as he's forced to let the McLaren through. But it is just free practice, guys. We're not at the race yet. That'll come on Sunday. But checkered flag out then for FP2. It's George Russell who ends the session fastest ahead of Oscar Piastri. Hamilton third. Then it's Norris, Verstappen the top 5. Alonso 6th ahead of Tsunoda. Magnussen is 8th ahead of Leclerc and Albon in 10th. Lance Stroll 11th. Perez down in 12th ahead of Ricciardo. Then it's Gasly. Sargent is 15th. Joe 16th. Ocon 17th ahead of Bottas. And then it's Carlos Sainz who ended his day early with gearbox issues. And Nico Hülkenberg, who found the wall. The car was damaged. He was fine. He got out of the car. But he ends the day 20th and last. Rosanna.
Thanks, Harry. So at the beginning of the session, I said there was going to be plenty more to learn in FP2. What are you come away from that session feeling now as we head into the sharper end of the weekend, guys?
Did you ask me how I'm feeling about that session? There was a loud car as you said that, so I missed it.
It's this whole F1 thing, isn't it? It's quite loud.
They're a bit loud, aren't they?
Yeah, can we turn that down a bit? No, so George Russell fastest in that session, and at the beginning of the session I said, there's going to be a lot to learn because FP1 was a little bit indecisive, wasn't it? But what do you take away from that session, and what are you expecting then as we move into the sharper end of the weekend?
Well, I think we take away from that session that it is tight at the top. We have got some of the usual contenders who are up there now. We've got Mercedes, McLaren, but the Red Bull doesn't look like it is, again, a foregone conclusion. And based off of what we learnt in Long Run Corner, Lando Norris, I think the orange Dutch army in the grandstands might well have to be their papaya orange instead this weekend.
Switch allegiance very quickly. And I'm just looking at the weather forecast because at the moment it's beautifully sunny here. Blue skies, hardly any clouds, just wisps really. But tomorrow there's a threat of rain. It's saying about 55%. So it's not a huge threat, huge possibility. But Alice, what happens tomorrow if it does rain in FP3 and then quali's dry? Do you mess around with changing a setup in FP3 and risk kind of getting yourself confused ahead of qualifying? Or do you just have to sort of cool your jets on that one?
Well, it's the risk that you will take. I mean, they have better radars, I would say, compared to the apps that we might use. I think there's 4 weather stations around the circuit, which are keeping an eye on the weather and measuring wind speed, etc. So they will have a very good idea of what the weather will be like for qualifying. Ultimately, qualifying is what sets the grid. So, but throwing into that, Rosanna, is it's looking like it's dry on Sunday on my weather app anyway.
Mine too.
So they have to think of that, because if they're going to put a great big wet setup on for qualifying, they'll then have to stick with that for the race. So you'll probably see that the teams will, if it is going to be wet, they're going to have to really try and stick to close to dry as possible.
It's going to be an interesting weekend. Of course, FP3 coming your way tomorrow. Will be live at 10:25, and then qualifying to set the grid for the Dutch Grand Prix from 5 to 2 tomorrow afternoon. And there is a sea of orange here. The Orange Army expects great things from Max Verstappen. Of course, he's been so dominant here over the past few years, but it doesn't seem to be going all his way thus far. George Russell fastest in FP2 this morning. It went to Lando Norris and the McLaren. So it does seem there's a credible threat from Mercedes and McLaren to the dominant force that has been Red Bull and Max Verstappen. Do join us tomorrow. My thanks to Harry, Alice and Andrew. Will be back tomorrow from 10:25 for FP3. Hopefully you'll join us then. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.